Good morning, everybody. Should be now seeing on our screen. We thought we'd start with a little helpful note to everybody. As you see EOD, please remember that's end of day. Your leader really, really cares that it's end of day and not end of December. A lot of places gearing up for holiday times. And what I've seen around us too, a lot of people trying to use up flex days and holiday days. So end of day, not end of December. But before we start our conversation, we're actually going back in time. This photo is one of my dads from 1966. There's Calgary's skyline in 1966. And we always take a minute on Fridays at the beginning to stop and recognize. And for those of you based here in Canada, you'll know that that's a very important part of what we do whenever we're meeting together, is a land acknowledgement. And the land that we are on, Craig and I are both coming to say, welcome to Friday, Jenny. Both Craig and I are coming to you from Calgary. There you go. And SAIT itself is based in Calgary too. But this land is traditionally known as Macintis. And Macintis means the meeting of two rivers. In Calgary, that's the Bow River and the Elbow River. Our land is the traditional hunting land of the Treaty 7. Those are the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy. That encompasses our Indigenous people of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kainai, the Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda, and the Northwest Métis homeland. We acknowledge everybody who makes their homes in the southern region of Alberta, but for all of you, wherever you're joining us from, thank you for just taking a moment to pause as we remember where we're from, and also, of course, where we're heading to next. Thanks, Craig.
Excellent. Thank you, Jenny. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, you've just heard from Jenny Gilbert, who is our leadership development specialist on the corporate training team, as well as facilitator extraordinaire of everything but anything to do with numbers and anything practical, as she likes to call it. And just a fantastic member of the team. I am Craig Hess. I'm the Director of Corporate Training and International Training and Individual Training here at SAIT. And we're happy to have you join us. For those of you who don't know, this is also being recorded to go out as a podcast later on. So as you go through, this will come out in audio version. You'll be able to hear the conversation. Should you want to carry us around in your ears for 45 minutes or so, which is an interesting thought. But I'm just going to pop the link to that in the chat. And then Jenny, this whole concept today of continuous improvement. Mm-hmm. This is something I've been thinking about lately. It's actually kind of funny. I've been thinking through some of these, what I would call business cliches, if we want, you know, get with the program, raise your game, think outside the box. There could be a whole episode in the future around thinking outside the box. Like, what does that actually mean? And as a leader, how do you get your team to do that? But continuous improvement for me is one of these as well. I think you hear the concept, you hear folks talk about it, you hear organizations and leaders try to focus on this, right? We're going to simplify. We're going to get 1% better every day. We're going to focus on continuous improvement. But what does it mean? How do you do it? Right? And as a leader, I love the concept. Don't get me wrong. That, like, we're in the business of helping people upskill and reskill, which is about improvement.
Yep.
This idea of continuous improvement every day sounds great. Of course, who's going to argue against it? But practically, what does it mean? And then how do you start to go about doing this if you want to get serious about it?
Okay. and agreed with you. It is a cliche. It has been around with greater popularity recently, but it's also been with us for decades. I think that's really important to sort of highlight. And you know, when you dig into this area, and you can do courses and spend days, and as you said, the larger companies, they have an actual methodology for this, and some of those are interesting. It's not an area that I dig into, but there's so many common pieces. And the part that I liked was the 1% better
Mhm.
But I think the bit that you caught on to is, how do you do this every day? And I think the answer is you don't. And that always
Okay.
it's a little bit hard. And so there is an adage for, so are you better today than you were yesterday? That in itself is continual improvement. So can I show up better today than I did yesterday? Okay, check the box. That is continuously improving. And James Clear has so much based on that 1% improvement every day. And you'll probably know the numbers better than me, but I think if you improve 1% every day, by the end of the year, you are 37% better than you were at the beginning of the year. So there's a lot to be said for that daily part. And then in the workplace, we have a day job to do. If you show up as a leader and say, right, we're going to continuously improve every day, you're actually pressing the button for a fast forward to stress and burnout if you're not careful. So I think the fine balance is between execution, allowing people to get on and do their day job, and then pause, stop. What do we need to continuously improve? I think that's important. And then how do we do that?
Love it. No, love it. And yeah, so the concept of, okay, every day, appreciate what you're saying there. Of course, you can't, that could cause some issues. But I think that the whole concept then of how do we create the discipline and the focus to, for lack of a better phrase here, focus on the small things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I think we've all seen the visual that probably goes around LinkedIn. All these business memes seem to go in cycles, right? Where you have the two ladders side by side, one with rungs this far apart and one with rungs this far apart.
Absolutely.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. Of course, it's going to be simpler to climb the one ladder. But I think in my experience, where I've struggled with some of these things is around working with your team, as the leader, making the decision to say, we're going to start going down this road. We want to implement this idea, this concept, socializing your team to it, and then actually implementing and starting and sticking with it. There's something around the discipline piece where all of a sudden day-to-day work, guess what, shows up and your focus areas get derailed.
Yeah.
So for me, there's something in here to tease out, I think, because I think it goes hand in hand with this concept of continuous improvement. I don't think you can just stand up and say, we're going to start continuously improving. Thank you very much. And team, go do it. Right.
So a couple of things that pop out there straight away is, number one, who's making the decision on what needs to be continually improved? So I think sometimes there's a place for you to come to our team and say, I think this is what we need to improve on. Yes. And there's an awful lot of space for you to say to your team, what is it that needs to be improved in order for us to be more efficient or effective or whatever the need is? And I think that's an important part to it, because if we use that blanket of let's continuously improve, that's a bit like, I think Monty Python had a sketch of the 100-meter race for the directionally challenged, and everybody just goes all off in different directions, and that's the worst case scenario right there. So the first part is, what is it that we need to improve? What we know is that people are incredibly tired, incredibly busy. That's a conversation all in itself. And most of your people, I'd go as far to say all of your people, don't show up trying to get it wrong in any space.
No.
So if we come in with, oh, you've got to do this and you've got to do this and you've got to do this, pure human nature says that's hard work. And it is hard work because I think, and this is the second part in what you said, once we've decided what it is that we need to improve on, we need to create a better habit around the work that we do. And so really what you're building in continuous improvement are habits. And there's so much that we miss in creating a habit. So in its simple form, continuous improvement says, Jenny, can you do a better job in this? Try this. put it into practice. But until I've got all of those parts that make up forming a habit, that's not going to be easy, and it's not going to come naturally. So we want to start with, what is it that we're actually trying to improve? And the closer that is to an observable behavior, the better, because we can see it, recognize it, celebrate it. And then how do we form that habit? And those of you who have dug into James Clear's book is Atomic Habits, and in our resources, in our show notes, whatever we call them, there's always a couple of suggestions. His book is in that suggestion this week, and that's Atomic Habits. But there's 4 stages to forming a habit. We have to notice it, we have to want to do it, we actually have to do it, and we have to like doing it. And I think there's the key, Craig, is that like doing it, because if this becomes a formidable task or a hard task, or even not a celebrated task, and celebration doesn't mean cake and parties and everything, it simply means good recognition, then we're not even going to begin to form that habit. And of course, straight away, those who are working virtually, those things come a little bit harder and with a different cadence. So how do you know when this habit is being achieved? How will you measure? What are those signs of success? I just dumped tons on you. I'll leave you there for a second.
No, it's good. The one thing that really stuck out to me in your comment there, Jenny, was this thought around observable behaviors.
Yeah.
What is it we are trying to improve? And I think if you go at this trying to improve an outcome, we want sales to be better. We want more widgets produced every day. We want whatever it might be, right? I don't think you can apply this to the outcome. You have to apply it to the process. You have to apply it to the behaviors.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can't just say, we're going to improve the outcome. Well, I guess you can say it. I did just say it. But what does that mean at the end of the day? It's the behaviors in the process that go into creating that output that you have to focus on. And I think lots of team members, and this is where I think perhaps we get back into some of our conversation around trust and psychological safety. Lots of your team members, to your point, Jenny, have ideas, right? On what could be better or what they think could be better. And so how do you get that information? How do you help them drive the improvement cart, per se?
Yes. So the age-old idea is have an ideas box or a suggestion box. And we know how old, in fact, if you still have one in your workplace, it probably has dust on it or maybe something decorative on the top of it because nobody popped anything in the slot. So it's kind of back to where we started today. As a leader, you have to create the time for this. This is thinking time. And we spend a lot of our time doing, and the confusion in there, Craig, is that outcome piece. Because if you stop to think, you stop the work to achieve the outcome. And so it's a friction, it's a tension. And in a world like yours, that's a pretty key tension, because if I'm not making phone calls, having meetings, whatever all those other parts are that are playing in there, then I'm not affecting the outcome. So what do you mean you want me to stop for an hour or two to have this conversation? So as a leader, you hold the role in that. And it's the same in many industries, is to press pause on that calendar. And in that calendar, that pause, it's not 20 minutes as part of a team meeting. This is time for us to come together and to stop and look at, from your perspective, and every single one of those perspectives around the table is different. What is it that we could do better? Or, to your point earlier, sometimes you're looking at a different picture than us, and there's something that's lagging. There's something that's not quite to where you want it to be, and you want to intervene in that to hit a possibility. Like, I think, we're catching 5 here, and we can make this 55. Okay, how do we, and that we is intentional, how do we get in there and do it? Excuse me. And that's where the ideas start to come. And you're right, we're into psychological safety because now we have to create space for voice. And in there, we have to remember that my first idea is not going to be great. And if you really want to go down that road, I'm going to think it's great. It actually isn't great. And so how do we get the ideas from all around us to add to that? And those ideas didn't exist before we came in the room. Coming back to what you said originally, if you come in with an idea and a solution, there's no conversation there. If you come in with a problem to solve, or, you know, we're looking for that, now there's a conversation in there, and now we own it, we're part of it. So forming that habit is much easier. And the key part in many, many workplaces for that is, what is the environment that we have set up? How are we positioned? We're really keen to always be victims of our environment. There's nothing I can do about it. My calendar is just back to back. Okay, let's fight that just a little bit. Let's position ourselves better to be able to take that on.
Okay, there's a few threads to tug on there. The first is this whole concept for me around, how do you encourage your team to bring the ideas forward? How do you work with them to bring the ideas? Donovan, I love your comment in here about, as a leader, I try to think about my team. To your point, Jenny, thinking time. Mm-hmm. As a leader, I try to think about my team and how I might help them become better as well, right? So it's not always on the team.
Yes.
But we know the team, probably the closer you are to the problems, the more likely you have ideas to unlock the solutions to those problems, right? But as a leader, sharing information, providing insight into a problem, or just walking the talk with them, that is also, I think, a hugely important piece in this, right?
Yes.
You can't just turn around and say, give me your ideas, and then, you know, not provide any of your own as well. I think it's finding that balance is such a key piece in there.
And so too, I don't know how many times we've had this, but what you have to be really careful. You're spot on, because you're the hippo in that conversation. That acronym's really widely used now. I think I've heard it about 5 times in the last week. Hippo, just in case you haven't come across it, highest individually paid person's opinion. So in our room, Craig, that's you. You're our hippo. And so if you have an idea and you say that, it is really hard for us to work against it. So yes, bring your ideas, and don't make them first. Bring your great questions first. And in my experience, when you give people a space to show up and have conversation, unless your psychological safety is rock bottom on the floor, people will show up and have the conversation. It's how you engineer that conversation to help people in there. And so maybe it's a reflection. Like if you're heading into team meetings this month, people are reflecting on the past year. Well, where did we nail it? Where did we not quite get there? And start the conversation gently. It's stages, it's bits. This is the whole part. This takes time to do this. It's not a quick one. And you can send, once you've thought about them, you can send those questions out early. Let your thinkers have extra thinking time, and then bring that into the room for the conversation. But the other thing, and this is actually one of my applied, you could do this moments today, is we're very reflective when we stop and try and be reflective. We're always looking back. We have closeout meetings and postmortems and all the rest of it. But you can also pre-mortem something. So if you are looking at next year, calendar year, okay, here's where we want to do, here's where we want to get to. And in some cases, we have no choice. Those numbers are put on you. And so, okay, here's our numbers that we have to get to. How do we get there? What could we make even better to help us either hit that number or get beyond that number? And then the pre-mortem is, what's going to get in our way? What will cause us to stumble? Questions along those lines. And once we've got those answers, what will we do about that? At what point will we call each other in, or at what point can I, as leader, call accountability and say, we had this conversation, and when I saw this, I had permission to press the button and say, hold on, we're not doing what we said we would do. That's an easier conversation than our classic, oh, you haven't quite got it right. I need you to do this. Whereas if we've already said, these are the things that will allow us to be better, improve. Now we have those markers, those labels to be able to say, you know what, team, this is what we said our observable behaviors would be. We're not doing that. What's caused us to run off the slip?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's we're not doing that part. I think organizations and teams especially have a tough time
Yes.
not necessarily identifying, but letting go of once you identify it, right? You like changing a habit. Sorry, let me back up. So much of what we do at work is probably habit driven, right?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yes. The most dangerous phrase in business is, well, we've always done it that way. Totally get that. But there are some things, right? Policies, procedures, processes, etc. But if you are deciding that you want to make a change because there's room for improvement, how do you truly let go of the old stuff, right? You're going to have the bell curve of acceptance on your team. You're going to have folks at either end of the tail, those who want to be out there innovating every day, which is an entirely different potential problem issue. But those who are comfortable being back here on the other end of the curve and saying, I really don't want to change. I'm retiring next year or whatever it might be, right? So the identification of things to change going forward, I think can often be easier, right? Everybody's got ideas. Everybody's got their complaint list too, as well. And I think there might be something here that we can double click on around how do you solicit productive ideas without just wallowing in the complaint list?
Mm-hmm.
But then how do you let go of stuff? And how do you truly empower your team to let go of it?
So I think all morning I'm going to end up quoting a lot of James Clear, but I'm pretty sure this came from him. Two things that he said that I quite enjoyed. One is you have to give your goals a place to live. So, and I think this comes back to your ladder analogy, which is a cool picture at the beginning. And that is where, when, and how. Where, when, and how does this exist? And gaining acceptance around that is a big part of the conversation, to your point with the team. And if we're talking 1% better, we're not talking massive change. Eventually it will be, because these tiny tweaks basically change us, change the environment around us. But when, where, and how will this happen? And once that becomes part of our language, that becomes easier to drive. And the other thing that, and I'm pretty sure it was James Clear that said this, is optimize for the start line, not for the finish line. So you were right when you said we can't do this by outcome, but we get really fixed on that outcome and what it is. And sometimes we get our egos wrapped up with that outcome as well. But if we optimize for the start line, that lines everybody up to be able to take the action and then build from there. Remember, the last part of forming habits that was in James Clear's 4 stages was liking it. So if we've optimized for the start line, we have a when, where, and a how, we have that ability to be able to drive the like. And the like might be the signs of success. The like might be recognition. But one of the things that this is definitely James Clear, is he talks about put a big calendar, if you like, up on your wall or on your desk, or have a virtual one that you can engage in. And each day that you do the new habit, you put an X. And if, or each transaction, like whatever that looks like in your workplace, might not be daily, but as you build those X's, our dopamine and our oxytocin goes mad. We love that chain of X's. Well, now the game, if you like, is don't break the chain. Whatever you do, don't break the chain. It might not be brilliant version of, but you didn't break the chain. And so,
No, I love that. That's Jerry Seinfeld. Often, if folks are Seinfeld fans, you will hear him talk about his writing process for comedy. And it literally is that. It is the daily writing, like the creation of daily habits. As we keep going here, there's Tom and Kay were having a good conversation here in the chat about, this whole concept of thinking time to be able to draw out ideas from your team and to be reflective and to take that time to pause. At least that's how I'm interpreting this chat here. Comes a little bit challenging when you have an environment where your time is all billable hours, and hours have to be right. And how do that, there's some structural things around that with organizations where maybe you just physically cannot do that, right? But thoughts around this interesting piece here. And as we keep going, folks, please do, if you've got specific questions, throw them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen there.
Yeah. It's a good question. And it's going to vary across organization and probably across industry and how we do it. The one that jumped to me straight away, and I don't even know if this is fair, is does the billable time have the non-execution time wrapped up in it? And so, yes, you're not actually working on this, but you're still working on that, and switching from James Clear to Simon Sinek. How many can I name in one morning? But Sinek talks about his finite game and his infinite game. And if you don't stop to look at how can we make this better, where are we focusing our time, what are we actually charging our clients for, like what are we up to, that billable time, if you're not looking at all of those factors, and he has 5, you're playing the finite game, and the finite game is about winning tomorrow or winning next month. It's that competitive piece. The problem with that is you're going to end up stuck. And so the infinite game is built up of a number of finite games, but that finite piece, as you come to the end, what happens next? And so, within that time, is there a pre-mortem or a post-mortem possible? And the other part that sort of hangs in there for me is, what are the priorities that are being focused on? It's a difficult part. And the other part too is, if everybody is on that billable time piece, can you create the space for a different version of time? And without, we're going to dig into industry differences and organizational differences and how those are all structured, really.
Yeah. I think, it's a tough one for sure. I think the other piece that you touched on there that I wanted to come back to, I think it's kind of that Shane Parrish idea you were touching. Sorry, folks. Shane Parrish is another one of these authors, fellows like James Clear, et cetera, that's worth checking out. But he touches on this whole concept of how are you positioning yourself, right? And I think this is where you were going around. I'm going to try and tie a couple thoughts together here of, how are you positioning yourself to set yourself up for the best success, right? And so where I'm going with this is if you're building the idea of continuous improvement, and we want to start focusing on specific things, right? Are those things in your calendar?
Yeah.
Right. So how are you, it's going to come back to a real basic idea of time blocking.
Yeah.
Right. So as a team, if you've decided we are now going to focus on A, B, and C, can I go to your calendar every week and see time for A, B, and C in your calendar?
Yeah. And I think that's it. I haven't actually read his book. Clear Thinking is his book for those. I think it's Clear Thinking for those interested. But I believe the tagline is, don't talk to me about priorities, show me your calendar, just as you said. And the interesting part too is that we've said this before too. We are talking about priorities again. Priority is a singular word. It's only in the last goodness knows how long that we've made it priorities, plural. But this is a real interesting part, because our brains, our focus, and everything else about us, 1, 2, maybe 3. So if we hang with A, B, and C, for what you said, Craig, can I see A, B, and C in your calendar? But most organizations, most teams have A, B, C, D, E, and F. And the problem with D, E, and F is they are our greatest distraction. Because what we're good at doing is creating this wonderful story. Well, I'm working on F, so therefore I'm being productive. Well, actually, F is the thing that I like to do most. It's nice and comfortable, but because it's in that list, I'm being productive. And so this, again, is another tricky part for leaders, can you narrow it down to A, B, and C, if we like, within there?
Yeah.
And remove the distractions of D, E, and F. And if you, as a team, I then wonder, and I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if on a team then, if you absolutely have to have A through F, do you then have a focus of A, B, and C for part of your team and D, E, and F for another part of your team? I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we're better with 1 to 3, no more.
Yeah. Couple other things I think we can jump into. I don't want to lose sight of these before we get to the end. One is, I don't think you can have a conversation around continuous improvement without talking about Kaizen to a certain degree. So let's just make sure we get to that point. A thought around, and I'm still going back to this soliciting of ideas. And let's face it, the ideas that we get from our team are probably related to problems or issues. Right? They're either going to be related to problems or issues in the world affecting their job, or they're going to be related to, I think this is an idea that can help us to do something better, different. It's those probably the two branches of that tree. But I want to come back to those. I want to get to Dave's question first, though, before we lose sight of it. Sometimes when we look at improvement, we look at weaknesses to improve. We use the old acronym SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Is there a different way of looking at understanding weaknesses?
Yes. So, and I know you're grinning at me because this, you're quite happy on a Friday morning to press the button. Oh, this will make Jenny talk lots. So weaknesses, we've kind of been conditioned to spot the weakness. So I'm all good with SWOT. I think you have to be aware of, like, what does that look like? But when we remove it to, or refocus it to the individual, what we know, and there is a ton of research behind this, is that a positive attention moment is 30 times more powerful than a negative attention moment. And we're quite clever because we'll dress up the word weaknesses. I think this is an opportunity for you. The problem with weaknesses when we're looking at a personal level is they suck the life out of us. And so Craig says to Jenny, can you please get better at Excel spreadsheets? You're getting zero engagement. And if it's the difference between getting paid or not, okay, I will. But there is no engagement.
I don't think I've ever uttered that.
No, you wouldn't. You just know that you wouldn't. You're way smarter than that. But that's what happens because we've been conditioned to say you're not good enough at this. When you focus on the strengths, they're exciting, they're easier, and we want to get better. And we enjoy mastery, and that's one of those key components of intrinsic motivation. The interesting part when you start to look at a team is, okay, what is our weakness as a team? This is a little bit different because, and back to your sort of point, Craig, and you keep making me think of that wonderful iceberg. I forget whose it is, but it's known as the iceberg of ignorance. And the people on the front line see 100% of the problems, 100% of the issues, and as you get up, it gets staggeringly lower. And so involving your people in the conversation is crucial. But when we look at a team and we look at weaknesses, the interesting part here is, are we actually all doing the tasks that line up to the Shane Parrish point to position us for the most effective way to get to our desired result? And if you're very caught on your boxes, this is Jenny's job description and this is so-and-so's job description, you might not be meeting that. And so then you can sort of cross over who's doing which task to reach the desired result for that outcome. And it might change when your outcomes change or when your next part changes too. So I'm not against weaknesses. It will always sound like I am, but I think we have to be very, very careful how we address them and how we build them. And your strengths will always be more powerful than your weaknesses.
Yeah. And I think to your point, I think it's probably the way we are wired for the most part, right? You think about, go back to school, come home with 97% on an exam and hear the question, well, what happened to the other 3%? Or maybe I just grew up in a bad house. But I'm just joking. But it's that is some of that is, I think, more of the default than the 97% was awesome. Right. And so that is something I think you really, as a leader, just have to focus on being highly cognizant of. And to your point about, the 30-to-1 ratio or whatever it is, one negative comment can override however many positives, not just in that moment, but as we've talked about before, for hours, days, potentially weeks, right? So yes, there's always going to be times where if there's a critical issue that somebody did wrong, right? You're going to have to find a way to address that, take corrective action, make sure it doesn't happen again, help them make sure it doesn't happen again. If it's the happening again piece that becomes the issue, that's a different conversation, right? But how do you focus on the, you did a great job. The next time the situation happens, focus on the positive of you actually got it right.
Catch them doing it right. Catch them doing it right. And if you've had those conversations about observable behaviors and what we'll do, when, where, and how, you're positioning, there you go, you're positioning yourself to be effective because you're positioning to be able to catch them doing it right. And when we catch people doing it right, and we have to be careful because it gets misinterpreted as, oh, great, now we have to give them a ribbon for showing up. Not at all. But if you're talking about changing habits, to start with, that recognition of the new habit has to be consistent for us to get that cadence, that repetition of it, because really it is about putting the reps in. It is, it's just like if you're going to the gym or, any new habit. And that was the other connection in there, Craig, too. Is it our default? Your default's a habit. You can change it, but we get defaulted, if you like, by the language that we've been socialized with. And so your brain says to you, I'm a leader, therefore I have to play the power tension. And yes, you have power, but there are different ways to own and play that power. And so we, as we said, catch them doing it right.
Yeah. Along that line, I think this is an interesting piece. Again, going back to the concept of soliciting ideas.
Yes.
Getting feedback. And I'm going to I mentioned issues or problems or opportunities for growth, doing something better, different are the two branches. The concept of, and I've heard leaders say, don't bring me problems without bringing me the solution. If I had the solution, why would I be bringing you the problem?
Yep.
Just thought around that, because there is, I get the intent of the statement, right? Show me that you've thought about ways we could potentially address the problem.
Mm-hmm.
What's your reaction when
I completely agree with you. And when we dig into the collaborative world, and really what this thinking time is collaboration. So in our sort of legacy movements, we coerce, we don't collaborate. And that coercion is, here's what I want you to do. Here's my idea, follow me. That's coercion. And collaboration is, here's the issue, what can we do about that? And so the minute that we say, bring me your solution, you've put the pressure on them. Like, what if this solution isn't right? What if this solution doesn't work? What if my solution
what if I don't like your solution, Jenny?
Exactly. And if you are a little bit intimidating and a little bit scary, I am not bringing that solution to you. And so there's that, we haven't even got there today, there's that big fear piece that is part of that whole contribution suggestion part. So the way that we rebounded by that in a lot of places was an innovation bonus or a suggestion box. If we pick your suggestion, you can have some extra money. And funnily enough, that didn't work very well either. And so you see the extreme examples, and I think, I forget now, the early examples, I can't remember the companies, but Daniel Pink talked about them a while ago, in that, you know, they gave them a day per quarter to go fix and solutionize and whatever they wanted in that day. And so many different solutions came out of that day where they just left people alone to discuss it and figure it out in teams and in areas. Well, that's really cool. But once again, what we're saying is they created the pause. They created the stop time to say, okay, what's getting in your way? You're smart. We'll stay out of your way. How can you fix that? Now, you know, generally what we see is that people can't give a day, or, you know, so we're talking about perhaps a smaller time. And so how do you get those suggestions? How do you get those ideas? One, you have to have the psychological safety so that they do feel secure to be able to show up and say, this, I think this is a problem. And if you say that and 5 people around the table are like, oh, it's not a problem for us, there's no psychological safety in there. If, however, you bring up this problem and somebody else says, oh, I found that this has worked, that's a valuable contribution. We're actually learning in there, and that problem has been fixed. And I think, Craig, to answer your question, how do you get the ideas? How do you get the suggestions? You have to create the space for those voices and make this a part of your operating rhythm. And that's the hard bit, because, and I think you said this completely different conversation, but you and I were chatting the other day, and I think that you said life just runs away from us, and that is a work life, is, yeah, our home lives run away from us, but work lives do that too.
Yeah, I show you my calendar, but you know, can I stick to that calendar? That's an entirely different conversation.
And there's a part in there too, though, Craig. Like, you know, we're talking about this is, it's easy for us to say in black and white, but there's a huge amount of hold yourself accountable.
Yeah.
Would you pay you for what you delivered today? Don't answer that.
I was going to say I'd pay myself a lot more.
Well, there you go. But there is some self-discipline in here too, I think.
Yeah. No, absolutely. But speaking of calendars and time, we've hit the point where we need to wrap up for the day so we can get folks back to their days to go do their thinking, solicit their ideas, and focus on their continuous improvement. This is where Craig stretches to fill the.
There you
go. I'm not even gonna focus on the fact that you invented the word solutionize, but carry on.
We'll have to have at least one new word a week. So every time, it's not every week, every time that we meet, we close with our big idea, or one big idea, or somebody's big idea, 2 things that you could do right away, even today, that will help you towards the topic that we've been speaking about. And we like to say, because 1, 2, 3 works nicely, 3 questions. Actually, it is 3 questions this week. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6, but usually 3 questions. So our big idea this week, and we've talked about it a fair amount today, continual execution. When we're busy doing the day job, we are busy, and calendars get stacked back to back, and we generally tend to get what we expected. But there is a possibility there for leaders to intervene and create what might be possible. That's what the continuous improvement is. If you actually stop and think about it, it's kind of cool. What would your team be like if they were 37% better by the end of the year? And that's just 1% per day. So 2 things that we can do. I quite enjoy this quote from Einstein. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem. And there's a typo in there, 5 minutes thinking about solutions. It's all about time. Now, you have a part to play in controlling the clock. It's interesting. There's another part that we've kind of held on to forever. The clock used to be controlled for us, and now we have an opportunity to control the clock. So as a leader, where can you create that thinking time? Craig mentioned calendar blocking. Maybe you're going to make some time for your team. Those of you working in the billable time world, where can you book the conversation to even start that conversation? How do we do this? How do we create thinking time so that we can leapfrog ourselves into those possibilities? And the second one I've actually mentioned today already. They haven't always come up in our conversations, but I did mention those pre-mortems. So this is an interesting way to look at continual improvement. But you can take everything that you've learned and say, okay, what will get in our way? What can we do about that? How will we notice when it's getting in our way? And what action will we take? There's a lot to be said. Don't give up the postmortems, but don't forget the pre-mortems as well. And then 3 questions for you. These are designed to hopefully just get you thinking a little bit as you move through your Friday. One for you as an individual, the second one maybe as a team. That could be it for till the end of the year. What is one stressful activity that we could give up for a while that will create a breather for us? There's a lot of people who are running on attention at the moment. This may help. And then Craig, to your point, I'm not sure that we answered the question completely, but it's worth noting, where are your ideas and suggestions coming from? There you go.
Yeah, the ideas, and I'm impressed. 3 questions. That was good. But the ideas and suggestions, I think, are going to. You just have to find the space. You have to find the time. You have to find the way to engage, and you have to find a way to help your team take action on them, or show them that you're taking action on the ones that you can take action on.
And I would switch
to create that flywheel.
Yeah, I'd switch the word find to make. You have to make.
Yeah, absolutely. But we're running over time now for sure. So we are back one last time before the end of the year, December 15th. And we're going to kind of take a look back on the year, look forward to 2024. What are the things as a leader you need to be thinking about going into next year? Please do note where you can find all the prior webinars. Have yourself a fantastic Friday, a great weekend. As always, Jenny, I appreciate you. Thank you for what you do here.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.